Hi, today we're going to discuss the categories of abuse, maltreatment that adopted or foster children may have experienced. And I'm going to come at it from a different angle. You can go online and find the lists of the descriptors for each thing, but I'm just going to come at it from a more practical perspective for you. So let's get started. There are 4 main categories of abuse, but I'm throwing another one in there. So first of all, let's go through those. It's sexual abuse, physical, emotional, neglect, and domestic violence. And what you will find is that children generally have been through more than one. So even if they come into care or they come to you as an adoptive parent and you have it on the chronology that they've experienced one of the abuses, the chances are they've probably experienced more than one, unfortunately. So when we fostered, we found that children would have several of the abuses and sometimes experienced all of them together. So let's get started with sexual abuse, the most difficult one. We'll get that one out of the way because it's the one that I find difficult to talk about and adults find difficult to understand why other adults could do that to children. So bear in mind that any form of direct abuse to a child is about hurting a child and it's about power. And therefore, although they're different, they're all the same in that respect. Neglect is more about what a parent isn't doing for a child. They're neglectful and they're not providing for the child their basic needs that they need to live. So the sexual abuse, first of all, it's any sexual act toward a child is considered sexual abuse if it's with a child and they're not of lawful age to have sex. So it doesn't need to be penetrative, it can be any form of sexual act that you can think of toward a child would be sexual abuse. And it also includes watching things with the child, so watching other adults do things or watching things on TV or whatever somebody might put to the child, because what it's doing is it's breaking down the child's innocence. The child is no longer in the dark about what sexual acts are, but they're not of an age where they should be knowing those things. What to look out for with a child is complex. There'll be many things. There'll be many indicators, but you may not first see them. They can be quite covered, I think, because children don't talk in sexual terms. They still don't understand what's happened to them. So you may see the way they play with toys is different. The certain positions are happening. You may find that they've got a huge body awareness and embarrassment around their body. I mean, other children may have as well, but you might find that they're more aware of their bodies. You may find physical things have happened to them, that there are some physical things to the genitalia that have happened. They may seem very sore, they may have infections, and you will most certainly have that they are ones that wake up with dreams at night, and bedwetting is also very, very common. So, but there's a whole host of other things as well. So, sexual abuse. Physical abuse is, I guess, a little bit more obvious. It's anything that hurts a child physically. So there's a huge list of those things. And maybe we should put in there the threat of violence to them as well. So sometimes it's not the fact that it's actually happened, but I guess if the parent is very punitive with their discipline and they're threatening them all the time that they're going to do this or that or the other to them, then that could also be put in there as well, although that could also go into emotional abuse as well. What you're looking for obviously is marks, but I think the trouble with physical abuse is that there are not always marks. And the reason why children are sometimes not removed from their parents is because marks can be covered up, marks can be put in places that aren't obviously seen. And children can be hurt without marks as well, I would suggest. Also, there's going to be emotional damage from being physically abused, lots of fear, lots of trauma. You may find a child is very anxious all the time, shall we say fearful of you and what you might do. So I'll give you an example of a child that we had that when we would change the nappies or we would do things that required them to be looked after physically, then we'd often get this happening. And so that would teach us that they were scared of being hurt. Finding this video difficult. I'm just going to take a drink of water. So the third category that I'm going to give to you now is emotional abuse. I think this one is potentially the most deep-rooted, and because I think this will happen with all the other categories of abuse. Emotional abuse is consistently telling a child that they're no good, they're not worthy. It can be the threats again of doing things to them. A child wakes up daily knowing that they're going to be pummeled by the parent emotionally, mentally. So it's more manipulative mind games. A child is told again and again and again that they're worthless, and threatens with things that are going to happen to them, which I know I said about physical, but it falls into emotion as well. And a child is fearful all the time, and the child's vulnerability and emotions are played on by the adult for a game and to hurt them emotionally. Emotional abuse, again, very fearful child, very anxious child, a child that has no sense of worth, has no sense of their own self or being, very, very low and depressed child. And then we go to neglect. Neglect is sometimes because an adult wants to do it, so therefore it kind of falls under emotional, and sometimes because an adult can't do it, and there can be reasons why adults are not able to care for children properly. So it's a slightly different form of abuse. But if it goes on for a long period of time, very, very damaging. So neglect can be, I say very damaging, they're all very, very damaging. I don't know why I'm saying that, because they all are. Neglect can be not enough food, being starved. It can be just not enough clothes, so they're cold, or they're hot, or the clothes are ill-fitting, cared for hygienically, so lice and just dirt. And neglect is difficult because neglect can come and go. So a parent could be in a good place and look after the child for a couple of months and then fall backwards and not. So neglect can be a bit of a bumpy road, and over a period of time is terrible for the child. Parents who are deliberately being neglectful can also hide this, and there needs to almost be consistent evidence of neglect, so it's quite hard to prove. But again, it often exists alongside the other forms of categories of abuse. So with a child that's been neglected, then they are likely to be very worried about where food is going to come from and overeat or store food. And same with possessions, they're likely to try and store any possessions they have. And sometimes with neglect, it's more likely that development will be behind because they're not getting that stimulation as well. So neglect can include just not interacting with the child on a daily basis. So then we come to domestic violence, and this was more common than what I expected when I was fostering, and it kind of featured all the way around. I mean, domestic violence can be either parent, so it can be male to female, female to male, but what you have is a household that is always on red alert and waiting for those kind of terrible scenes to unfold, and often children are witnessing high level of threatened violence or violence toward the other person, so they're scared for their own lives and they're scared for the lives of either mother or father, and that constant threat that they live under causes them to be on high alert all the time and very anxious. So these are children that will kind of jump at any loud noise and be always looking behind their shoulder, highly anxious, sort of agitated children. And of course that goes back to the emotional abuse side. So if you're going to wrap it all up, you could say that whichever type of abuse you're looking at, you're going to put it under emotional. Their emotions will be affected, either being delayed, heightened alert, damaged. Trauma is connected to that, of course. And so whether you are fostering or adopting a child that looks or seems easy or doesn't look or seem easy, and they've been pulled away for any of these reasons, you have to expect trauma and lots of healing to take place, not only when they first come, but for a lifetime. Now, I'm not trying to kind of frighten you at all, but that's the reality that's the reality. And this video has been super difficult to make because I know what my boys have been through, but I hope that you will find it helpful in at least kind of mapping out where you are, what you might need to look for, or if you're later into adoption or fostering, you know, whether any of these things are starting to come forward. So thank you for watching. Check out my playlists, all sorts of adoption topics on there, and I'll see you on my next video. Thank you.